If you're a Filipino fisherman trying to catch some fish, as you and your ancestors have been doing for like forever, there are People's Republic of China Coast Guard vessels harassing you while you're trying to earn your daily wage or sustenance. Is this true or false? Wherever you are, welcome to another of my takes on China. And this comment was sent to me along with a great question about the South China Seas. One of Malaysia asked, "Hi Jerry, as I only understand English, I've few other sources to go to get information. The YouTube algorithm is suspect. It's influencing what I can watch. I want to know if you know anything about the Chinese Coast Guards harassing Filipino fishermen in the South China Sea." One then went on to provide this quote from someone who'd given it to him. "You may have a different perspective if you're a Filipino fisherman trying to catch some fish, as you and your ancestors have been doing for like forever. Whereas now and for many years there are PRC Coast Guard vessels harassing you while trying to earn your daily wage or sustenance." End of quote. Well, I'm glad that one raised this, as it gives me a great opportunity to debunk it. It's a great question, so thank you, one. No one is stopping the Philippines fishermen in the region. Despite appearances, no one is harassing the Filipino Coast Guard. It's all a huge beef-up. The shoal is disputed. There's no doubt about that. But under the Treaty of Paris, 1898, in which Spain handed control of the Philippines to the United States, there was no mention of this region. It's been part of Chinese waters since well before that. It's accepted in the Cairo Declaration of 1943 as Chinese territory, and because of that, I've linked the Cairo Declaration from a Chinese website. I've also linked the US Department of State reference to it. It's accepted under every single agreement that exists. I know that if I were to say to someone on the other side of this debate or argument, they'd immediately say, "That's not what UNCLOS says," and we'll definitely come back to the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea in a moment. China doesn't want to develop this region. It has, and it's continuing to say that it wants only one thing for the region, and that is to keep it pristine. Once again, I know there will be people who dispute this, but I'd ask them before they argue with me, go to China's position paper on the South China Sea. I've linked that. It was only released a few days ago, and it links historically to documents from China's perspectives, as well as the United States, and what they've historically said, as well as what the Philippines have agreed, and what the United Nations has accepted. Now, the biggest problem is the number of people commenting on this matter understand only one aspect of it, and that's the aspect they read in mainstream media. So let's look at this particular problem where the Coast Guard of China are perceived to be aggressively water cannoning and ramming ships. Anyone trying to go about what they claim is their legitimate business seems to be a target. Well, there are several flashpoints. The one we're seeing most of is the second Thomas Shoal, where over 20 years ago, the Philippines deliberately beached an old wartime landing craft and set up a temporary base there in order to make a claim that the island was inhabited. It's not even an island, it's a shoal. So while the region might be disputed, it's not China who started that current dispute. It was the deliberate actions of the Philippine Navy. China has allowed and still does allow replenishments of food, water and supplies to the Philippine soldiers stationed there, but will not allow the supply of building or construction materials. And this is what the water cannoning is actually about. There were negotiations and an agreement under Duterte and Aquinos before him to have this removed. It doesn't belong there. Under Marcos, he's not only kept it there, he's attempting to fortify it and build onto it so it can be expanded. And the Chinese Coast Guard is preventing that happening. So when you see pictures of the Chinese Coast Guard water spraying a Philippine boat, this is what that's about. They're attempting to replenish this. It's not as Western media would have us believe. They're forcing poor Filipino fishermen out of the region. They're trying to stop the gross destruction of a pristine shoal in the South China Sea. That's the real story that you won't see in Western media. The only thing China is asking the Philippines to do is leave the place alone, as they have agreed to do. But if you look carefully at the history, you'll see it's been like this every time there are conflicts between the US and China. The US encourages Philippines to escalate tensions in the region. What's really worth looking into is the Cairo Declaration, where the islands were named and assured that they would be returned to China after the war. The Cairo Declaration was 1943 and the islands were still occupied by the Japanese. Interestingly, it's the first reference that China usually uses to assert that Taiwan is part of China, something the UN states is undisputed, because it said all the territories Japan has stolen from China, such as Manchuria, Taiwan, and the Penghu Islands, the Pescadores. So we now know from the US signed documents that Taiwan and China are the same country and that the island chains taken by Japan would be returned to China. It's really hard to argue when history disagrees. One other thing the Cairo Declaration said was that Korea would be independent after the Second World War ended. But there's another thing the US reneged on when they invaded the peninsula. Professor Ana Rosario Malindog-Oy has been a critic of the Philippines' action despite being a citizen of the Philippines, indicating that where there are people who are well informed, they're usually informed that the position is not as crystal clear as the current Philippines or even the US government would have us believe. Professor points out that the Philippine government, has not published an official map indicating our maritime zones, geographical coordinates, latitude and longitude, such as our exclusive economic zone, our contiguous zone, and our continental shelf. Her work is based on facts, realities, and attempting to diffuse this matter rather than inflame the situation. She further points out that the Philippines' ASEAN neighbors, especially those who are co-claimants, do not recognize the Philippines' claims. One should understand that the South China Sea is disputed not just by the Philippines versus China, but by 5 other countries, she pointed out. So going back to the supposed international court, which gave the Philippines a win over China, the truth is very different. And again, we're misinformed by media as to the veracity of the findings there. People will often cite this UNCLOS tribunal, which they say gave the islands to the Philippines. That's absolutely not true for 2 reasons. Firstly, the findings of that tribunal was that it would not adjudicate on the land, only maritime disputes. It had no authority over sovereign territorial disputes. The loss of UNCLOS means law of the sea, not of the land. Furthermore, the tribunal was not a United Nations court. It was a group of people that the Philippines paid. They hired a room in the United Nations and held hearings that had no official capacity. China did not participate. In other words, the name we use in the UK to describe such an event is a kangaroo court. The findings of the report are in fact 501 pages long, and I've linked it. But here's an important quote from it, Section 5. The Convention, however, does not address the sovereignty of states over land territory. Accordingly, this tribunal has not been asked to and does not purport to make any ruling as to which state enjoys sovereignty over any land territory in the South China Sea, in particular with respect to the disputes concerning the sovereignty over the Spratly Islands or Scarborough Shoal. None of the tribunal's decisions in this award are dependent on a finding of sovereignty, nor should anything in this award be understood to imply a view with respect to questions of land sovereignty. End of quote. So nothing in this 501-page report gave the Philippines, or China for that matter, the right to occupy the land that's been disputed. The matter will need to be dealt with elsewhere and through negotiations. So don't forget to ask yourself, when you see events like this happening, how is it that those vessels have US and European journalists on board? They have thousands and thousands of dollars worth of cameras already set up, waiting for what the porn industry likes to describe as the money shot. China has gotten wise to this now. Chinese ships send up drones to get proper coverage of how the boats are moving. In every incident that I've seen, it's clear, and I have a sailmaster certificate from a long time ago, so I understand the rules of navigation and collision avoidance. It's clear to me that the Philippine ships are the ones at fault. Interestingly, I've never seen a Philippine video showing the actual course of the two ships that collide. Only Chinese videos, and they clearly tell me the fault is with the ship that fails to give way, which in every incident I've seen so far has been the Philippine ship. For a long time before I understood this matter and researched it, I felt the same as most people. China's doing something wrong here. So when people tell me this, I ask them, do you know how many disputes there are in the South China Sea? Most people don't. There are many. I ask, have you read the Paris Treaty, which gave the Spanish colony to the US and created the Philippines? They have not. I ask, have you read the Cairo Declaration? They have not. I ask if they understand UNCLOS. They do not. I do. I also ask if they read the findings of the Philippine-convened tribunal into these disputes. They have not, but I have. Invariably, if I find I'm arguing with someone who has read nothing but Western media headlines, which leaves me with one question. Do we believe what we read in Western media? Simply put, we don't. Or at least no one with any sense does. But when China is portrayed negatively, they, or we, unashamedly accept what we've been told as gospel truth. Nowadays I don't, but instead of calling reporters liars and leaving it that, I do my research. I find what's wrong. Then I point it out to the writers who then usually either block me, disengage with me, or call me names for challenging them. The very simple answer to these people who do believe what they read and who see this is, please don't argue with anyone on a topic on which you're unprepared to debate with some degree of knowledge. Because those people will lose the argument every time. And in some cases, like this one, when they ask for links, which I provide, and they accept that they've been misinformed, in many cases, they don't. They simply start calling me names because, as is often the case when people don't like the information they receive, it's very hard to accept that we've been duped for so long. And often people revert to type. That type sometimes is quite ignorant and quite racist, which is why I like reading and replying to questions like this one. We know we've been misinformed. We've sought answers, and now we have them. Now, I hope this helps others to understand what's really going on in the South China Sea. Do a little research. I personally understand the Philippines' grievances, but I disapprove totally on how they're going about attempting to resolve them. Thanks once again for watching my take on China, and I will see you next time. Please don't forget your like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.